Next thing I remember, I was being hugged by every single member of OCF in warm blankets, and that was one of my most joyful days, publicly declaring my faith in Jesus Christ.
Everyone has a story to tell.
Stories of hardship, stories of hope,
stories of doubt, stories of faith.
But no matter the story,
these diverse experiences of military life
can all be found at the intersection of faith, family, and profession.
This is OCF Crosspoint.
Today I'm going to share with you the story of Chip Chu. When I interviewed Chip over a year ago, COVID-19 wasn't exactly a household word yet. There was no point of reference or context for things like flatten the curve, social distancing, wear your mask. Or who could forget the 8 p.m. howl for first responders and medical personnel in the early days of the pandemic? And yet, here we are. In one way or another, all those things I just mentioned have a unique role and meaning in your life and in mine. As I reviewed my conversation with 2nd Lieutenant Chu, who was still a Firstie at the Air Force Academy when I interviewed him, I came across this soundbite where he was describing some of the social isolation he experienced during a semester in Taiwan before COVID-19.
I describe it also, and even better, as the best time I had with God one-on-one, the most intimate. And it's incredible how God does that he took me away from somewhere I was comfortable with, somewhere where I had people to go to all the time, and he took me out into the desert. And I was there for 4 months, and when I came back, I had a stronger faith that could fight through circumstances. I didn't get knocked down that easily anymore.
It's pretty remarkable how apropos that statement is amid the current coronavirus pandemic. So, after a year of COVID-19 stay-at-home orders, social distancing, ordering food delivery, and the like, how is your faith doing? Would you say it's stronger today than it was back in 2019? Just something to think about as you listen to Chip's story.
My academy story it's God's story. It's how he revealed his plan to save me. The Air Force Academy was my first time that I really had an opportunity to become independent. I had a really tough family time growing up, and I had a difficult senior year in high school. And so when I came to the academy, it was pretty much for an opportunity to go to school, to be independent, away from family. And I really wanted to serve, but I didn't really know what to do with my life. I'm from a Chinese American family. My parents immigrated from Taiwan, and they came here in their college years. They met in college, and they had my brother and me. My brother's a first-year teacher in New York City, and we grew up not having much, really. We grew up in a small one-bedroom apartment, and I mostly remembered my parents trying their best to give us the best education, to work hard for us. And they really did try to love us the best they could, knowing what they did. My family, they're not believers, and it's been my prayer every day for them to come to know Christ. But I grew up really having a difficult time with my family. First 7 years of my life, I think I had the sweetest time as being an obedient boy. But as soon as we moved to Jersey, I think I was susceptible to the devil, and I became a rebellious boy. And for the next 10 years, I really faced so many dark spots, and every single pitfall I took, I disobeyed my family. And when the Bible says, honor your father and mother so that your days may be long, I take that to heart because I realize the consequences that God had for that commandment. And I disobeyed everything. And this is before I knew God. And so my family really tried to love me, but I was disobedient. I was not a loving child, and we were from a broken family. I just remember some nights where we had awful arguments, and my father, I had that one moment where my father hit me so hard that I remember that night, and it's a scar in my memory. Abuse was what I would call it. It's what it was, but I went through various episodes and did not honor my parents at all. And so when I came to a point in my life where I said I just wanted to be myself, I didn't want my family anymore. I tried to separate myself completely. And so during my difficult senior year, in that year, I remember just not being able to be on talking terms with my family. And I started having serious concerns about how was I going to get to college? What was I going to do after high school? And I started realizing that my relationship with my family is so awful that I need to find my own way. I knew that I wanted to serve. I didn't know it was the military. I just wanted to serve. I wanted to always do something for others that I never really had. And so the military became an option for me when I visited actually the University of Maryland at our ROTC detachment. And they were the ones who mentioned about the service academies. And I realized that was the thing I was looking for. The Air Force Academy was one of my two options between that and the Coast Guard Academy. And they were the perfect opportunity for me to become that independent person I wanted, to branch away from my family and to seek my identity.
You'll notice that his story started with what might be called a crisis of identity. In this case, the crisis was deeply rooted in his difficult and tumultuous family life and those rebellious teen years that Chip just talked about. One of the things that stood out to me in that part of his story is when he talked about how depressed he was during his senior year of high school and that he needed a savior, but he didn't know that's what he needed at the time. Given everything he just described about his upbringing, I was curious if he could recall exactly when he heard about God and Jesus for the first time. And not so much the names God and Jesus, but rather the concepts of sin, salvation, and the gospel.
So the first time I really think I heard about God was at the academy. It was at the cadet chapel. There might have been moments growing up, but as I said, I had a really hardened heart growing up. When I came to the academy, God started revealing his plan to save me. And so when I came in on June 30th, 2016 in processing day to basic cadet training, God took away my hardened heart and replaced it with a soft heart. And it's a miracle I can't quite explain, but I became a very, very soft person, not in strength, but in my openness to start seeking. And I believe that if you seek God with all your heart, you will find him. When I was at the chapel, that was my first time I had exposure to Jesus and the Bible. And I can't remember who, but I was given a camouflage devotional and a Bible that I read every night. And really, my first true exposure to Christ had to be through two cadres members, Cadet Technical Sergeants Casey and Rhea and Brendan J. Rodish. I call them my shepherds because they really just walked side by side and took me throughout basic training. And I can only remember the positive things from basic. And that's not the characteristic of basic when you talk about your memories. And out of basic training, the two of them brought me to OCF. And that's where it all really, really kicked off.
Well, let's have you continue with your testimony. I want to ask you how you became a believer. I think you were beginning to allude to some of that in your previous response. And then it sounds like your first exposure to OCF may have had something to do with that.
So I was a broken person, and I still am, but I was lost in high school. And at 17 years old, when God replaced my hardened heart with a soft heart, that was a turning moment for me. I attended every cadet chapel service with an open heart. I didn't know anything about the Bible. I didn't know any of the songs we were singing. I didn't know why we were doing X, Y, and Z, but I knew that I liked it, and I can't quite explain it, but when I was there, I felt safe, and I knew now, in retrospect, that God was touching my heart. He was drawing near to me, and he was calling my name. And it took me a while. I got through basic cadet training. The two shepherds that I mentioned, Casey and Ray and Brendan J. Rodish, they brought me to OCF. And OCF became the family that I was always looking for. And that's really what I call OCF, my family. It was a support group. It was a group of friends that no matter what happened, they were there shoulder by shoulder with me. There was something that was going on around September, freshman year, and it was a dually retreat, not so far from here. And so September 24th, 2016, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. The things leading up to it was just God working on my soft heart, calling my name, and I was all vulnerable at that point. I was broken. I was searching, and God, I don't ever recollect a memory that he verbally spoke to me, but I knew he was there. And that's something that you can't quite explain with words, but through the Spirit, I knew that God was calling my name. And I still remember at Frontier Ranch just looking up and praying for my first time. God said he was there for me, and that's my first conversation I had with the Lord.
The story continues then up at Spring Canyon. And I know one of the popular phrases in culture is a baptism by fire. But I think in this case, it was probably a baptism by ice, because weren't you baptized in February outside at Spring Canyon?
Yes, sir. February 11th, 2017. It was a cold, wintry day. And I remember all of us finishing the morning service and rushing down to the ponds. And I remember looking left and right. I was like, there are icebergs all over here. And Colonel Steve Wade said, get in. And I was like, okay. Can't remember the words he exactly said, but I was just ready to say, yes, I do. And next thing I remember, I was being hugged by every single member of OCF in warm blankets. And that was one of my most joyful days, publicly declaring my faith in Jesus Christ.
There are many metaphors we can use to describe the church. And in Chip's story, the one he chose was family. And in this case, the family he talks about came in the form of the OCF group at the Air Force Academy. Chip told me it was the place he spent the most time, and it was a priority for him.
OCF is everything to me. I would have to say that these years have been amazing. We haven't had more excitement for the Lord and for our friends in OCF. And some of the things that are going on is through biblical teaching and fellowship. And those are two of our big pillars that we have at OCF USAF. We have an amazing ministry team that provides us that biblical teaching, and the ministry is so much stronger than it's ever been. Some of the things that we do at least 3 retreats throughout the year at Spring Canyon, including work retreats. Throughout the year, we split our time on Mondays between class time, where each of the 4 classes, they get together independently, and the ministry team teaches them. We pray together, we learn together, and that becomes a really, really tight-knit group. People that we'll remember forever and spend time forever, and every single time we get back together, it's like no time has elapsed.
So as you look back over your time at the academy, what are some things that you've learned about yourself?
So over my 4 years, my faith has grown. I like to describe myself as a sponge, and people call me that too, because you would never have imagined that someone who did not even know the Lord, 4 years later, through God's will, would call my name to lead as a cadet in charge of OCF. And that's just something that's through God's grace. It just shows that God wants to grow each one of us and stretch us and provide us trials to grow our faith. And so my biggest lesson learned in, I think, my 4 years here would have to be that your genuine faith is your own personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I think over the years, I've learned that your faith cannot be dependent on other people. It really can't. As much as I love OCF and my church family and all my brothers and sisters in Christ, I realize that if your faith is dependent on other people, what happens when they're not there? And so some lessons that I've learned within the cadet ministry, they happen through trials and they happen through challenges. And I would put these 3 challenges down. That's what we face as cadets daily in OCF USAFA. The first one would be the future. Everyone has a hard time figuring out what's going to happen tomorrow. Fortunately for us as believers in OCF USAFA, we don't need to worry about tomorrow. But one of our biggest struggles is discerning God's will. We as cadets don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know the squadron we're going to shuffle into after 2 years. We don't know what job we're going to get. We don't know what base we're going to get stationed to. We don't know anything. And this is something that we wrestle with. We are like, God, tell us where you want us to be. And so in our 4 years here, I think we are presented with many trials that allow us to grow in our faith, to trust God and to depend on him and let him guide us. Number 2 would be competition. We struggle with identity at the academy because each one of us is racked and stacked, competing with one another. And we are given a number. Everyone in our class, my class 2020, knows the number that we have been labeled with. And it's so easy that if you do not have a savior, it can become your identity. That number can provide you inadequacy. It can give you confidence issues. If you don't place your identity, your foundation is something else. And fortunately, so gracefully, we have Jesus Christ as our foundation and not that number. That can really put you in a dark spot. I've seen so many cadets just become brokenhearted because of that number tearing at them, and they don't have their self-worth. And the third issue I would really like to explain would be time. I believe that time is a catalyst for all our spiritual issues at the Academy because we are given a plate that we cannot handle. Each of us have 100 things on that plate, and we only have the capacity to do 50 of them. And so a spiritual issue becomes, how do we use our time? How do we use our resources and our gifts that God has given us to glorify Him? And when we are presented with this challenge of time, it is so easy to toss away your quiet time. It's so easy to say, I don't want to go to Bible study. I have to do this homework.
What did you think about those three challenges Chip talked about? Figuring out the future, struggling with competition and identity, and properly using our time and resources. Those are three areas that, to some degree, will always present some difficulties for all of us. And while those are challenges that Chip talked about as being specific to his time at the Academy, I asked him if there are any questions or concerns he has as someone who's just getting started in his military career.
I think the biggest question I would have is, how do we live our faith in the operational Air Force? All of us are going out, and while we have had a close-knit of OCF members in the church body surrounding us, how do we live that genuine faith I was talking about? How do we have a faith of our own that's not dependent on circumstances, but is foundational in Christ? And so as we go out, the question is, how do we plug right into a church body? How do we find these brothers and sisters that will support us along the way in our new assignment? How do we find that new mentor? I feel like at the Academy, we are so fortunate and blessed to just be given things. It becomes easy to find a mentor. It becomes easy to get peers that will lift you up when you're in need. But off we go into the operational Air Force. We're going to have a harder time at first getting to know people and to find your community when you don't live in a dormitory with 1,000 other cadets. This is one of the biggest issues that we're going to face once we pin on our butter bars on graduation day. But it's something that I believe OCF has prepared us for and we're ready to face. I'd say that the biggest thing that OCF can equip us with is with Christ-like role models. We see that at our academy where we have this amazing volunteer ministry team. They pour out their hearts to meet with us, to teach us, and to pray with us, and something that I don't take for granted. And so as cadets, we really need role models because we have not experienced what it's like to be a Christian in the Air Force. At the Academy, we have a couple years where we can watch how our ministry team, how they live their life for Christ. We have a fair dynamic between retired officers and we have active duty officers. And as we see how they live their faith, the mistakes that they made, the experiences that they had, we learn and we watch, and we're those sponges. So OCF equipping us with this ministry team has been a very big part of what we need at the Academy. And outside the Academy, once we leave, we're going to be looking for those mentors as new lieutenants. We're going to be needing those people to show us how things are done. And so as Paul had Barnabas and Timothy, I like to use that example. We as cadets just need role models in our lives that will show us how to do life.
What Chip's describing is getting the proper spiritual support network in place. Again, it goes back to the concept of family and seeking out those Christian family members at his new location. Earlier, Chip talked about the rocky relationships and brokenness in his earthly family when he was younger. So perhaps role models weren't something he had while growing up. But since he's become a believer, has there been any reconciliation with his estranged family? Here's what he says.
God is good. I praise him. He's the father that I never had, but always wanted. And God is a God of healing. So going back 2 years, I was able to reconcile with my family because a big part was on March 30th, 2018, I was convicted by the Holy Spirit to apologize and start this path of reconciliation. There's a song, I Can Only Imagine, from Mercy Me, and Bart Millard, his story is about, if God can forgive me, I can forgive anyone. And so a huge part of my testimony is that as I circled back to my family year after year, just not being on great talking terms, but just having a deep heart for them, wanting to know the Lord because I have experienced something amazing that's beyond words. I wanted them to experience it. And because God forgave me, I was able to forgive my family. those scars are still there, but I was able to use those scars to strengthen myself because God gave me a story that's mine. And on March 30th, 2018, I was convicted to apologize and just not to have a debt with my family anymore. And though my family, they're still not believers, I pray for them each day that they will come to know the Lord, and that when they do, our family will fully be reconciled in Christ, because no circumstance can do that. Only God can. He can bring broken people together, and he can heal them, and he can make families that are estranged from each other back together. And a part of God's goodness and his divine plan, and things that we can't come up with, but things that he knows, is how we reconcile. And this is by God's grace alone. I can't say anything about it, because God brought us together at Weisofer Springs, the Eastern Conference Center of OCF, over a Christmas break this past year. And that's something I'm so grateful for. And something that I can't really explain in words, but you can see in my years here how God, in each little way, however big or small, is doing the work of reconciliation. It's not on my shoulders. I'm so grateful that God's in control.
I remember when I first reached out to you about being a guest on the podcast, you were studying abroad in Taiwan. Take me back to that semester, knowing that that's where your family is from. What was that like?
Going back to Taiwan and on semester abroad was probably the best opportunity I had at the academy. It's going to be my best memory at the academy. It was very heartfelt. This is where my people, my heritage came from. And here I am in America wearing the cloth of my nation. It's just, you can have that identity crisis, but I did not, because I had my foundation as a child of God. And going back home to Taiwan, where my parents were from, I could start to see how the culture that they grew up in, all the social orders that was there, that really explained a lot to me why my family lived the way they did. And going back home to Taiwan, my second home away from home, I was able to grow my faith in that. I like to describe Taiwan as the most spiritually dry in terms of fellowship. It was hard to find a church, hard to find a body of believers that would support me like I have here at OCF USAF. But I describe it also, and even better, as the best time I had with God one-on-one, the most intimate. And it's incredible how God does that he took me away from somewhere I was comfortable with, somewhere where I had people to go to all the time, and he took me out into the desert. And I was there for 4 months, and when I came back, I had a stronger faith that could fight through circumstances. I didn't get knocked down that easily anymore. Now I even have more knowledge of my own family and experiences that I would never have plotted. So God's will is perfect. And I encourage anyone that's listening that whether you know it or not, he's in control of your life. And that's something that's good. It's not scary. It's something that's amazing, and that he will take care of you.
I really like his answer when he talks about remembering that God is in control of our lives. And that's a good thing. It's not scary. And in Chip's situation, God used Taiwan, or this desert, as he called it, to strengthen his faith and to give him insight and clarity on his family. Here are some final thoughts from Chip as he finishes telling his story.
My favorite verse is 2 Corinthians 5:17. I have it ingrained in my class ring, and it was the verse that I read to everyone at my baptism a few years ago. And it's, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come." I'm a broken being, just like you. And my biggest takeaway in life now is that God, his grace and his mercy and forgiveness is unfathomably great. And he can forgive anyone, and he will forgive you if you seek him. And as a new believer, I had a hard time forgiving myself. I was like, if Christ can forgive me, I can forgive myself as well. And so the verse is black and white. You are a new creation, and your old self, it has died. And yes, I realize I'm going to sin every day, and I'm still going to live in this flesh, but I can live with an attitude and a new perspective of life, that I have this freedom that only Christ can provide. And it's nothing that I can do on my own accord, but it's something that he provides us, and it reminds us daily how good he is.
OCF Crosspoint is a production of Officers Christian Fellowship. For more information about OCF, check us out online at ocfusa.org or find us on Facebook and Instagram at OCFUSA. This episode was hosted, written, and produced by me, Josh Jackson. Audio cleanup and repair was done by Michael Jerry of Mighty Productions. If you have an idea for a guest, topic, or story that you think should be considered on a future episode, send an email to podcast@ocfusa.org. Thanks for listening, and be sure to join us for the next episode of OCF Crosspoint.